Welcome to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Elizabeth. Thanks for joining us today. Well, after the winter we've seen a massive change up, and planting season is starting to feel closer than ever. I know I'm getting a little bit nervous that it's already time to get planters out. And a lot of you are maybe feeling the same way too. Or you're already on top of things and yours is ready to go and you're just waiting for the first dry day. Either way, planting season is nearly upon us. And as always, we like to bring in Dr. Erin Wilson to give us an overview of what we can expect as the season kicks off. So welcome back, Erin.
Thank you very much.
We typically start off with a look back, and I think maybe for the first time ever recording the spring look back, we get to talk about snow.
Yay!
Yeah, indeed. It's been a while since we've had a winter like this.
It was wonderful.
Yeah. We were heading into the winter, and sort of last fall when we were looking at conditions, we weren't sure how the temperatures were going to play out. The Arctic really controls that in a lot of ways. Precipitation, we were leaning at above average, wetter than average, with a La Nina situation in place. It didn't exactly pan out that way, but with plenty of cold air around, it certainly led to a lot of snowfall. So, I've waited my entire life for a 70s, what I would call a 70s-ish type of winter that everybody, our parents and grandparents talk about, even though it was nowhere as cold as 76, 77, even 8 and 9. But we did break, in a lot of cities, we broke 1978 blizzard in terms of the amount of snow in a 24-hour period. And, I had 14 inches in my house in Southwest Ohio. And so that was more snow than the blizzard of 78. Of course, the blizzard had a lot of wind and drifts that were over, as tall as buildings and houses and stuff. We didn't have a lot of wind with this storm. But it certainly was an interesting winter here, I think.
Yeah, that really surprised me when we were talking about that. When the way people talk about the blizzard of, 8?
Yeah, the big one in 78 here in Ohio.
I just imagined huge drifts, which I guess there probably were, but along with that, 3 feet of snow at least. But it really was about the same amount as what we got this time.
Portions of northern Miami Valley, like Darke County, over Shelby County and areas, they picked up close to 20 in 1978. Yeah. So they, it was a significant amount of snow, but 78 mile per hour winds, 100 mile per hour winds down Lake Erie. It was a true blizzard. This was not. But it was fun. It came on my birthday, so on January 25th, picking up all that snow. If we look back to, temperatures overall, it was a cooler than average winter. We were about 2 to 5 degrees below normal. We're waiting on the official records, as we're recording this in early March, but it does look like this year tied with 4 other years for the 34th coldest if we go back 131 years. So not even the top 10 coldest, but certainly coldest since 2014 and 2015, which that winter was about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit colder than what we just experienced. So just to put it in perspective, we might call it a 70s-ish, but it wasn't anywhere close to what we experienced in a lot of winters in the 1970s.
Yeah, it was enough to keep the kids out of school for a while, though. So
certainly used up their calamity days this year.
Did, yes. Well, I think one thing that we've been wanting is a deep freeze. We haven't had a lot of deep freezes for that when we think about soil compaction. And of course, with the snow, I still don't think we got that. Talking to people who were installing tile, digging down, it didn't seem like that frost got very deep.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, one of the things about the snowfall this year was it was pretty light, fluffy. It was not a great necessarily insulator in that case. I mean, obviously, if it's fluffy or a lot of air, then that can help. But we actually saw some pretty deep frost depths, actually, especially in Northwest Ohio.
Okay.
We approached 16-inch depths in the frost up there. So it was between 12 inches up there. Nice. Southern Ohio, not as deep. Generally at least 4. We got down below freezing to just 4. We didn't see any, sustained upper 20s at 4 or 8 inch depth, but we certainly got down to about 30, 31 down to 8 inches. So about half of Northwest. But Northwest Ohio had some deeper frost levels this year, which, is good. Now, they needed a lot more moisture than they got in Northwest Ohio. So that was the other sort of big story about precipitation this winter.
And precipitation was something that was really top of mind going into winter because we had those drought conditions late in the summer. So what kind of impacts are you seeing with, obviously we've gotten some pretty significant rainfall too following the snow, but where are we at in terms of busting the drought?
Yeah, so we've really been, if you look at the sort of a longer term trend, we remember 2019. 2019, obviously, from a wet perspective, especially again in Northwest Ohio. But that followed several, 17, 18, 19 are all in the top 10 wettest years in Ohio's history. We've been on a downslide since then. It's nowhere close to like the 30s or 60s droughts in terms of the amount of rainfall. But it has been drying, and now we've had back-to-back droughts, historical drought in southeastern Ohio with the D4 exceptional droughts of 2024. That flashed to the Northwest. Northwest has been dry, over a year at this point. We've got precipitation deficits in Van Wert, Paulding County, Hancock County of more than a foot of rainfall needed to, in terms of a deficit. You might not ever make that up. You certainly don't want to see a lot of that precipitation come down at once. Southern Ohio is trying this week, as we know, as we record this here in early March. But yeah, so we have had those dry conditions that have extended on. And, I took a lot of questions heading into the, late fall and into the winter, like, does drought actually exist in winter? Yes, drought exists in winter. We had strong drought conditions in the summer last year with our driest August on record. We followed that up with a very dry fall, and it's been below average, for this winter. I think overall the state is about 60% of normal. So only about 60% of what we typically see for a state average. But in Northwest Ohio, we're looking at, 25 to 50% of what we typically expect during the wintertime. So unofficially, this is our 8th driest winter on record, and our driest winter since 1986-87. Wow. So it's been a while since we've seen dry winters like this. And in the late fall and into the winter, we start to lose the agricultural visuals of drought, of course. But the hydrologic, the water impacts start to become a lot more apparent. So the stream, the rivers, the soil moisture has been really low. It's still only about 10 to 20% by volume in Northwest Ohio. The ponds are down, the reservoirs are down. Delphos, which is a city up on the, Van Wert, Allen County line, put in a phase 1 water conservation order on February 3rd. Their reservoir is at 50% capacity at the time.
Oh, man.
So there's a lot of hydrologic drought signals out there, and we can have winter drought, and we're experiencing it. We've experienced this year.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that trend of brief wetness in spring, makes our minds think that we still have quite a bit of precipitation because it's coming when we want it the least, when we're trying to plant. But then seeing how flashy drought has been the last 2 summers, it's really, knowing that we aren't fully recovered is a little concerning even heading into the summer.
Yeah, it makes me think of, if we look at 24-25 again, Pickaway County, D4 exceptional drought. Last April, May, and June, they picked up 31 inches of rainfall.
Oh my gosh.
Right, in a 3-month span.
Yeah.
This year, again, Ohio had its 5th wettest April through July. 5th wettest, 131 years, yet in August, the driest August, kickstarted another major drought. And so this, these flashiness, the rapid oscillations, we've talked about that, before on this show. That's sort of the signature of what we're seeing in terms of those drought conditions.
And I get a little nervous when you mention 86, 87, because when we look back at Ohio crop yields historically, that season, although it's not one that we hear stories about, jumps out in the crop yield data as a rough 2 seasons in a row.
Yeah, and I would imagine 88 the same.
88 that's one that's a storied drought.
So here's the key, and I think it's really important for the audience this month is, what I've been saying all winter is, let's see where we're at the end of March. Because if you look at that, again, driest winter, you get into the spring conditions. If you've got those dry conditions and they continue into spring, that's when we get a big issue, right? Because we can make up ground once, you can correct me, right? We can make up ground if we get the crops in, get them out of the ground, as long as we can get a little bit moisture throughout, on a weekly basis throughout the summer, we can be okay. The problem is, like in 88 or in 86, 87, or 87, when we came out of very dry winter conditions, March through July was very dry. So it's very difficult to establish those crops and then likely giving those bigger yield impacts.
Yeah. Timing of dryness with crop stages is unbelievably critical. We can be really resilient to some briefer droughts, but if they come at the wrong week or 2 weeks, it can be devastating.
Yeah.
So we're talking about drought, but at least here in Madison County, we've been getting a lot of rain the last few days. So, what's been going on here recently, and what are we looking at over the next couple weeks?
Yeah, so as we, obviously we look back at the end of January, February, we were dealing with very cold temperatures, right? Minus 22 in Worcester, unofficially minus 31 in Springfield, Ohio. A lot of negative degree, sub-zero temperatures, just again for a little bit of perspective. And I know I'm jumping back again, but it's to set up what we're looking at now is just the difference in the weather patterns just a month ago where we were dealing with some deep Arctic air, sustained cold pack, certainly the coldest again winter since 2014, 2015 for us. And that allowed that snow to stick around for a long time. Again, 2015, we had 15 days sub-zero. We only had 9 in Madison County this year, right? So as we're kind of in Madison County this morning recording. So, 2014, we had 20 days below zero. So it's just something we haven't experienced with in the last decade or been able to talk about on this podcast, as you mentioned, and we're all snow lovers, so that's good. But we've seen, again, such a radical, rapid change to the weather pattern all winter long. Strong ridge across the west, deep trough across the east. We know that the ski resorts out west were just abysmal this year. And outside of California, Utah, where they picked up 3 systems and got plenty of snowfall, there are a lot of areas out there that are going to really hurt for moisture this summer because they depend wholly on their wintertime precip. So for us now, we've really dramatically shifted that. And it's led to a weather pattern that's opened the Gulf to plenty of moisture and just a huge influx of moisture out of the south. And so now we've dealt with, just in 2 or 3 days, a large swath of 2 to 3 inches along and south of I-70. We've got a good swath of 4 to 7 inches across Butler County, Warren County, Clinton County, Greene, Madison. All of us, the 3 of us, live in that very wet conditions. And you can't even think of drought, right? You look around, there's standing water, the streams are out of their banks. But you go to places like northern Mercer, Van Wert, Paulding, up to southern Lucas and Ottawa counties. The dry signals are a stark contrast to what we're seeing down here. So, again, that corridor up there, 12 to 16 inches below normal over the past year. And in response to that dry winter, even this week, March 5th, the release of the U.S. Drought Monitor reflected 67% of Ohio abnormally dry, except for this little corridor here from Dayton to Columbus to Cincinnati. So,
is there something with weather patterns shifting? It just seems like Northwest Ohio, they didn't have as extreme a drought as Southeast Ohio in 24. But it just seems like they're constantly in drought conditions of some level. At least that's been my perception. So is there something with the moisture that comes out of the Gulf? It's not, reaching them. And what's been that change recently, if you know that why it doesn't get to them?
Yeah, so it varies season to season. Right now with this early March pattern, early indications were that even we were going to get moisture up into southern Michigan, northwest Ohio. And as we got closer to the actual event, we watched the model start turning a little bit more toward the east and kind of avoiding that northern area. Part of that is again some large scale atmospheric fluctuations of where sort of the boundary is set up. We just have had that boundary drape across central and southern Ohio. We've had a lot of those foggy mornings. It's indicating that there is a frontal boundary there. A little bit cooler, as we were in the mid 60s, we had northwest Ohio in the upper 30s. And so that cold air was just far enough south to kind of keep what we call sort of the convergence of moisture across southern and central Ohio. A lot of times the perception is, now certainly in the summertime, drought begets drought. We know that, right? And we've talked about once you get a lack of soil moisture, you can't feed those summertime thunderstorms. This time of the year, it's much more what we call synoptically driven. It's large scale weather forcing. And you can get these really intense rainfalls on drought ground. And it's just because you're dealing with different types of air masses. Unlike in the summer where, you get a drought. Drought is actually functioning as the block to keep the rain from falling over that area. This just happens to be sort of the battle between cooler air retreating for the season as warmer, moisture air kind of pulls in. We do expect, we'll see. Obviously, the audience, our listeners are going to hear this after the next several days. But right now, as we record here on the 6th, we're looking at, maybe 1.5 inches, 2, even across northwest Ohio over the next few days. That's not a drought buster. That doesn't mean drought goes away. Remember those deficits. It just means we're going to hopefully start to moisten up the ground to allow right? What we also need is to moisten up the ground to allow water to penetrate and percolate down into the soil surface, because drought ground, heavy rainfall and drought ground can lead to, flash flooding and runoff.
Well, before we get to the outlook, I want to talk about a couple interesting things that you brought up pre-recording. And one, I got to experience both ends of it as I went from Ohio down to Florida. So looking back at the winter a little bit and the deep freezes and how far down they went. So it was -17 when we left for the airport, and we got down to Florida, and it was of course a little bit warmer, but they were around 32. They got below freezing a few nights that we were there down in Orlando. So share with us how far south that cold weather went.
Yeah, so you talked about freezing in Central Ohio or Central Florida. We had a lot of even low to mid 20 temperatures in Florida. So if folks saw those pictures of trying to protect the strawberries down there and just caked in ice to try to, and a lot of them, they still had a lot of damage. They're delayed even today getting the strawberries out of many of the farm and producers getting their strawberries out this year. But we hit 32 degrees. 32 degrees Fahrenheit was recorded in northern Cuba for the first time on record, right? And that's quite something. But again, the oscillation of the pattern meant the West was really warm conditions all the way up into places like Billings, Montana, and up into Idaho, kind of in response to that pattern. So just, extremes is the name of the game, and it doesn't necessarily negate cold extremes as well. We see fewer cold extremes under this changing weather pattern scenario, but you can get really big differences compared to normal because weather's just responding to imbalances of power here, energy. So 32 in Cuba is quite something.
The other interesting phenomenon that was noted at our house was how the thunder sounded a little different the other night. And I even texted you and I was like, Aaron, why is there so much diversity in how thunder sounds? Because sometimes it's a clap, sometimes it's a rumble. And it was, I don't even really know how to describe it the other night, but it was notably different in how it was sounding.
Yeah, so we know lightning is the flash, the charge, the discharge of differences in static charge there. And then you get the wave that moves outward from where the lightning occurs. And of course, the sound wave then degrades over time as it gets farther from wherever the lightning is occurring, whether that's strike from cloud to ground or in the cloud. But typically that can disperse in all directions, up, horizontally, west, east, whatever. It can just disperse like that. But we had a temperature inversion in place. And so, temperature inversions, obviously we think about those from a drifting perspective on herbicide, pesticides. Anytime we have a temperature inversions or temperatures increase with height, so you've got a warmer layer of air that's sitting on top of colder air at the surface. Well, that really forms a cap, right? I think your response was a temperature lid. Nature is wild. I loved your response, right? Yeah, that's what it is. You've got a lid there. You've got a cap there. And when that thunder rolls out, it's bouncing between the ground surface and bouncing. And of course, it's bouncing off other objects as well. But that sound wave is bouncing then off the top at that temperature lid, as you called it, and then it comes back down. And so it can rumble for a really long time. It can bounce off different structures a little bit differently and not sound like the typical summertime thunder that can permeate in all directions. So it really is a temperature lid that's leading to reflections in that sound wave.
Yeah, that was a wonderful storm the other night because it did not come with the threat of severe impacts, but it came with a beautiful light show and this very fascinating thunder phenomenon.
Yeah,
that we really appreciated.
Unfortunately, late February we already had, right?
We did.
This other thing that is becoming common in Ohio, which is nocturnal tornadoes in February. Like we can cut that out, right?
Yeah.
We can cut that out. We don't need. Thankfully, we didn't have any damage reported, but we had strong rotation. Really, Elizabeth, in our area, very strong rotation there. Plenty of tornado warnings, and no one likes to mess with those, and certainly not at night and not in February. But yeah, that was just a sign again about this flip in the air mass and weather pattern to go from such a cold surface with deep snowpack to a surface that's supporting thunderstorm development and rotation. Meteorologically, I'm getting chills just to think about those processes that happen in the atmosphere.
let's move on to Outlook as we continue this podcast. So, really, I think what most of us are interested in is what are we expecting for planting season this year?
Yep, absolutely. So we're getting there, right?
Yeah, like a month, really.
Less than that, sometimes. I mean,
Yeah, the early soybean planting guys, they're on their own in terms of forecast, but the majority of us in a month.
Yeah, and we know, we're already seeing, daytime soil temperatures 2 inch and 4 inches getting well into 50s and 60s with our highs in the 70s, right? The sun angle's getting up. Now we're cooling off when we cool off at night. We're in a warm pattern now, certainly through the first couple weeks of March as we get through this. But winter's not done with us yet. I think we've got to be really careful, and we know this. Like, we always obviously start itching, whether that's to plant, whether it's to fish, and other things. But we do see a pattern switch with increasing probability for below normal temperatures as we head into the end of the month. Now, what is normal? I mean, by the end of March, you're looking at normal highs in the mid 50s to low 60s across the state. So I would expect we're going to have some of those annoying mid 40-degree days that are breezy and everybody's grumpy because we've had 70s already. So winter's not done with this yet. We're likely to see some cold spells, but they're going to be fleeting and less intense as we head through the month. We will worry about our last actual freeze conditions in April because we're going to see freeze conditions in March, and we're still going to see hard freezes in March, mid to upper 20s. So
yeah, I mean,
winter's not done.
The real question: how many snows have we had on the forsythias so far?
0.
Awesome,
right? So
I like to hear.
Yeah, so the forsythia have not bloomed yet, so we're going to wait for those to bloom and then count the 3 down, and then we'll be done. So. Yeah, and I we didn't really talk about it, but the impact of the cold conditions and the snow covers, green up has been kind of later than what we've expected, experienced over the last several years, right? Certainly we walked out of the door today and said, look, the grass is green, the wheat's greening up, spring is here. But anyway, we certainly have good, we're going in the right direction. And so planting and spring activities are really what we're thinking about. We do have that La Nina pattern still kind of lingering around, so cooler than average sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific, but they're transitioning to neutral and likely will get there by April. And we're expecting neutral conditions through our upcoming summer. That basically gives us no information about the upcoming summer. And if any meteorologist in March tells you exactly 100% confidence what the summer's going to look like, they're lying, right? Of course, I'm on here and I'm going to give a forecast and what I think about it. But my confidence this time of the year is always buffered. It's always kind of dampened down just a little bit because if I knew exactly, right, I would be making trades on the stock market and probably not be here. But right now it does look, again, we've got these warmer conditions to cooler by the end of March. Wetter than average conditions throughout March, so we're hoping again this can start to break the drought. Right now our spring, as we look at it meteorologically, we are in spring. March 1st starts meteorological spring through the end of May. No real strong signals either way for temperatures. We're gonna have that roller coaster up and down. We're gonna be trending upward, which is good. The one caveat I would say to that is drier soils tend to warm up a little bit faster because they absorb that energy. I would say that soils in Northwest Ohio actually have the ability to maybe warm up faster than usual a little bit compared to maybe Southern Ohio where now it's really saturated. They may be a bit slower. So we may not see that north to south gradient in the soil temperatures as different this year as before, but we'll watch that. A lot of does, again, depend on that overall circulation and that weather pattern, whether that Gulf really stays open. Our precipitation tendencies are leaning a bit wetter than average. Confidence is, again, low to medium here for the spring. We know since the 1970s, springs have been getting warmer, about 15 to 20%. So this matches kind of those long-term trends, but we've got big drought to overcome in northwest Ohio. If you look at the forecast, I think this is a favorable forecast with moisture. We'll talk about summer probably in a couple of months here. But early on right now, indications are maybe warmer than average and maybe wetter than average. Those are the two kind of indications. So overall, what we're coming down to are questions of soil moisture recharge. How much do we recover? Will that allow us to get crops out of the ground? We think we will have enough moisture around. So yeah, I think the planting season, the growing season looks favorable as we see it here in early March. That's easy for me to say in March, right? And so we'll find out and we'll be back. But we certainly need the drought to start to ease this spring. So Our winter soil moisture recharge has been abysmal. We need better results here in spring for Northwest Ohio.
Well, not terrible, right?
I
We'll
think
see.
one of the most positive sounding discussions we've had probably over the last few years, which at the risk of sounding like my dad, I mean, we're due for a good one. We're due for a good one.
That's right. So we, obviously this time of the year, and we've said this now for years, people need to be ready. Right, they need to be ready to go. I think there'll be plenty of opportunities to get stuff out, get things tuned up, get prepped. We can't forecast, a month from now, are we going to have a week like we've had here in early March and have rain every single day? But I think there's windows there. We just have to be ready to go, and when the conditions are right.
Yeah, and along with that, some caution though, making sure soil temperatures are there and you're not pushing it too much. We worry about compaction, sidewall compaction. Elizabeth, you've shown some data at winter meetings where vertical tillage in the spring can decrease yield that you've pulled from eField's report, and that is most likely directly related to doing it when soil moisture is too high.
Yeah, we see a general trend. It's the most visible with that vertical tillage tool in our data. But we do see that trend to some degree across all tillage types. So making sure that you're not going out there and making a mess when it's wet is critically important. We know the sins of the spring. Mm-hmm. We pay for those in the fall. Just keeping clear eyes, clear minds as we head into the season is incredibly important.
And would you say like another interesting thing would be what is the pest and weed response after the cold winter conditions and how that might be different than what we've experienced the last few years?
So a lot of people think that a really cold, deep winter will lower insect pressure. But the truth is those insects are adapted to live here and they're adapted to survive. I think there might be some indication, I'm a little out of my depth here, but if we have a late freeze when they've already emerged, that could knock them back. But as far as being a really cold winter, lessening how many bugs we're going to see, that's not something.
Yeah, it's something we commonly hear,
right.
But the research is obviously less clear. It's more about those late freezes, as you mentioned.
Yeah, so for those who are looking at dry soil conditions in Northwest Ohio, our typical planting depth for corn, we recommend 1.5 to 2 inches, soybeans 1 to 1.5 inches. But if you do get into dry soil conditions, consider deepening that planting depth so you can reach some moisture. We don't run into that too often in Ohio, but it is something we've been seeing recently. All right. Any last thoughts or recommendations before we wrap up?
Anybody that would like to sign up for monthly and quarterly climate summaries, they can do so at the climate.osu.edu State Climate Office of Ohio website. That'll come to your email on a monthly and quarterly basis for those, similar information and some maps and things that we're doing today. Certainly you can check out, as drought continues, we've got nice resources on drought. go.osu.edu/Ohio drought. That will get you to the college drought resources. Continue to, look for updates there. Plenty of tips and sort of suggestions for dealing with drought or building drought resilience are also available as resources at that website.
And I'll plug the corn newsletter. We haven't done that in a while. I think most of our listeners are probably subscribed, but weekly updates during the growing season, what issues you're dealing with. Aaron provides weather updates as well. So really great resource to stay on top of things. Well, this was a little bit longer than we normally go, but we had a lot of information to share. So Aaron, thanks again. And we look forward to having you back soon.
Always my pleasure. Good luck, everybody. Have a safe planting season.
Thanks for listening to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. Join us again in 2 weeks for our next episode.